What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to College Football Talk with Peter Burnett. In today's episode, I'm breaking down all of the Week 5 action. It was an exciting week in so many different ways. Some big games, close games, exciting finishes, a big upset, and lots of important games when it comes to races in the Big Ten and the SEC especially. But before I get into all the action from this week and unpack it for you guys, if you're going to enjoy this video, please feel free to leave a like, consider subscribing to the channel, and turn on those post notifications so you're always up to date whenever I upload. Starting things out, the big game of the week, the biggest game to me at least, was number 6 Oregon against number 3 Penn State in that whiteout in Happy Valley. And it was a 30-24 double overtime win for the Ducks. To me, one of the main takeaways, I'm not going to say this is the main takeaway because I think there's big takeaways for Oregon as well, but it's James Franklin. Once again, it's another top 10 loss for Franklin and the Nittany Lions. They continue to keep things close. It's not like they're getting regularly blown out in these games, but they just, in those big moments, key moments late in games, just haven't been able to get it done. So that's another big loss for him to take. I mean, I think it's been since that win over Ohio State in 2016, at least they won against a top 10 opponent in a whiteout. But they made that run in the playoff last year. They kind of, I guess, overcame some of those doubts, but they still in the regular season have struggled to, and obviously even their road last year to get to the semifinals was a little bit of an easier one. So that's kind of one takeaway. Drew Aller as well kind of struggled with inaccuracy at times and maybe even poor decision making. We know they've got 2 really good running backs. They kind of were held in check by Oregon's defense, and kind of transitioning into what was working for Oregon. I mean, first of all, quarterback Dante Moore was exceptional. He finished 29 for 39 for 248 yards and 3 touchdowns. He was able to distribute the ball. DeCorian Moore, I think, was his leading target, but kind of had a few different guys he was able to get the ball to. And then I think defensively, it's even more of a takeaway here for the Ducks. Mateo Uagalele had 2 tackles for loss. Bryce Betcher had 12 tackles to lead the team. And then the big addition in the transfer portal, Dylan Thieneman, with the game-winning interception in the second overtime. To me, this is a little bit following after the recipe that worked for Ohio State, where you bring in an All-American safety. They kind of plug in there as a quarterback of a defense. They're cerebral players. They can tackle. They can make these key plays in big moments. And I think, going into the season, all the hype was around Penn State, kind of similarly to how it was around Clemson. Now, of course, Penn State did make that big addition of Trebor Pena at wide receiver, but other than that, this team, it was a lot of returning production, and that might be, yes, if you have a good amount of that, it can work in college football, but I think Oregon is showing right now, Ohio State has shown the last couple of years, maybe Michigan didn't need it as much when they won it all, but Ohio State last year and even Oregon so far this year are showing that sometimes you have to make kind of that, 1 or 2 additions on both sides of the ball in those key places to make an impact. And that's what Oregon got here from Dylan Thieneman. They also offensively picked up a big 4th down conversion in overtime. So big win for Oregon. Penn State's certainly not out of the college football playoff picture after this one. Franklin will have a chance to maybe finally get that top 10 win again when the Nittany Lions go into Columbus. But right now, I think it's Ohio State and Oregon as the 2 favorites in the Big Ten. Indiana is right there with them. I'll talk about it a little bit more later. The Hoosiers picked up a good road win against the tough Iowa team in a tough environment, but that is kind of the outlook there. Another big win this week, a big game, was number 17 Alabama against number 5 Georgia, and still the Crimson Tide have the Bulldogs number. I think it's 10 out of the last 11 that Alabama has won against Georgia, and this time, for the first time, I think since 2015 or something like that, they do it in Athens. A lot of those games were either in Tuscaloosa or in a national championship or SEC championship. Ty Simpson has been one of the most improved players from like week 1 to now in college football. He was efficient in this game, 24 for 38, 276 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, and he also ran in a touchdown. The Crimson Tide were able to build up an early 14-0 lead. A thing here, Bulldogs continue to kind of struggle early in games, and then the defense buckled down late. Big play, kind of as expected. LT Overton, I know, had one big play for kind of a big loss, and then overall the defense was able to lock in and make key stops. To me, also, Isaiah Horton kind of emerged as a receiver for the Crimson Tide. He had 13 yards per catch and a touchdown. Ryan Williams was kind of held in check a little bit. I think he was just over 50 receiving yards or maybe just under. And so Horton kind of stepped up there. It was a good target for Simpson to throw to. A big takeaway here, kind of for both of these teams, the SEC race is wide open. Texas looked like the preseason favorite. They lose to Ohio State. Georgia looked like kind of the favorite after that really good road win against Tennessee, and then they lose. Alabama, even, the team that kind of takes that next step into the favorite range, they obviously lost to Florida State in week 1. Now, the Tide are probably the most improved team in college football since, but they still have that loss that shows that they maybe have some either deficiencies or exploitable parts of their game. So I think they've really improved since then. Kalen DeBoer has helped them turn a page. Next up, they're home against Vanderbilt, and Georgia's going to be home against Kentucky. Again, for the Bulldogs, this season is nowhere near over yet. It's not like how it used to be in college football, especially when it was, a single national championship game or even the 4-team playoff. They still got their whole road in front of them, and really their only tough tests are home against Ole Miss, who I'll talk about next, huge win for the Rebels, and home against Texas, and then obviously that neutral site against a really good Georgia Tech team. So talking about those Rebels, number 13 Ole Miss is propelled by young quarterback Trinidad Chambliss in a 24-19 win over number 4 LSU. Chambliss accounted for 385 total yards, a touchdown. He did throw an interception, but really moved the ball well for the Rebels. For LSU, the question here, is it fool's gold for Brian Kelly and LSU? That win week 1 at Clemson looked really good. That looked like probably out of the week 1 games, it was probably the second best win in terms of preseason, based on preseason expectations, second only to Ohio State's win over Texas. Now that's faded a lot. Clemson is 1-3. Their offense looks anemic at times. Their defense even doesn't look quite as good as we expected going in. And obviously they've lost 3 games already through 4 games for the other Tigers. They also were really held in check. I mean, shout out to the Ole Miss defense. They made some big plays. I think Wydett Williams had an interception. They had some guys like Suntrin Perkins make some big plays. But overall, LSU's offense held to only 256 total yards and 19 points. So where is this LSU offense? I know they were missing Caden Durham, but they didn't really rely on the run too much anyways, which I thought going into the game they should have, based on how Ole Miss struggled against the run defensively. But to me, LSU looked like maybe a top 4 team. Now I don't even have them inside my top 10. I'll go over those at the end of this video. Next up, for Ole Miss then, home against Washington State, and then 2 big games at Georgia and at OU. If they win both of those road games, they could be the favorite in the SEC, and this Rebels team, outside of those 2 games, their path looks pretty clear. So Ole Miss picks up a huge win here. They've got easy schedule the rest of the way, while LSU, it's kind of the reverse. They're going to have games against Vanderbilt, Texas A&M, Alabama, and Oklahoma. All those teams are top 15 teams right now. I think Vanderbilt's 16th right now. So that is a really tough schedule. This is an LSU team where they are kind of, I think, a little bit more in trouble than some of the other teams that I've talked about that have lost. Yes, their season's not over. I don't want to be over dramatic here, but if the Tigers don't figure out things on offense, and I know that's obviously caused a lot of frustration for Brian Kelly, or else he wouldn't have lashed out at that reporter. If they don't figure that out, though, yes, they've got a really good defense, but it's going to be pointless if they can't get that offense working. So LSU, maybe a little bit of fool's gold. Penn State, kind of similar question there, but those are kind of my takeaways from that game. Also, there were some road escapes for several teams in the top 25. Indiana, number 11, escaped at Iowa. They made some good defensive plays late and kind of made up for some mistakes. Tennessee survived against a much improved Mississippi State team. They won in overtime in Starkville. Georgia Tech survived an upset bid by Wake Forest. I think they won by 1, I think in overtime as well. And then BYU scored a fourth quarter touchdown to go ahead and beat Colorado on the road. The Cougars have one of the top defenses so far in college football. They gave up 21 to the Buffaloes, but hold on for a win there, and they kind of take a few more steps into maybe being one of those top contenders in the Big 12. Next up, the big one Friday night. And I had this one as an upset watch along with Ohio State at Washington. Ohio State took care of business. Their defense continues to look like the best in college football, especially in the red zone, once again, making key stops down there and benefiting, of course, from the failed fake field goal for the Huskies. But for Florida State, I figured going into that one that it could be an upset watch, and it proved to be the case. I didn't predict the upset. I'm not going to take the credit there, but I did at least tell you guys to keep an eye on that one. Virginia wins in a double OT thriller, probably one of the best field storms ever. Tony Elliott has the Who's humming along. They're one of just 3 teams in the ACC who have started out 2-0. The other 2 teams are Georgia Tech and Duke. Now, I will say a little bit of a disclaimer there. Miami hasn't even played a conference game yet. I don't think SMU has either. So those are 2 of the teams that were probably in the top 2 or 3 heading into the season. So that doesn't mean that Virginia is suddenly the favorite in the ACC, but I do think they're looking really good. I knew Chandler Morris was going to be a really good addition for that offense. He put up some really good numbers at North Texas, and he's transitioned really well into the Cavaliers offense. Looking ahead for them, they're at 4-0 Louisville. They're home against Washington State, at North Carolina, at Cal, who has given some teams some issues actually so far. Cal's looked pretty good so far. They're 4-1, home against Wake Forest, at Duke, and home against Virginia Tech. Louisville, Cal, Duke, and Virginia Tech have all started 1-0 in conference play, so those all look to be important matchups down the road for the Cavaliers, but they're 4-1. They're up to number 24 in the country. I think it's the first time they've been ranked in over 6 years. I think it's been maybe even since 2019 or 2017. It's been a while since Virginia's been ranked. So shout out to Tony Elliott and the Cavaliers for getting in there. And I think that schedule, they don't have to play Miami. They don't have to play SMU. I would have said they don't have to play Clemson. I don't think that matters anymore. They probably would beat Clemson. And they don't even have to play Syracuse, who's looked good so far. And they already take care of Florida State, who has looked to be among the best in the ACC. So I think keep your eyes on Virginia. I expected them to take some steps forward this year. Their only loss so far is to NC State in a game that wasn't even in conference play. And then also looking ahead for Florida State. Next up, obviously, they've got that huge one at home against number 3 Miami coming up this week. I'll obviously preview that one in my week 6 preview video. Later on, they're at Clemson. Is that even a tough game now? I mean, sure, it's on the road. That Death Valley, they don't deserve the title this year, although LSU doesn't really right now either. But regardless, then also at NC State and at Florida. I think Florida State, obviously they've been upset already, so there's already that potential for it to happen again. But I think even if they lose to Miami, if they win out the rest of the schedule, they'll finish at 10-2. 10-2 is a little shaky, so Florida State might have to beat Miami here this next week, but I'll talk more about that game in my next video. Another one, kind of a survival here. This one was at home. Number 23, Illinois, survived some big errors late. There was the fumble at the goal line, and they went on a game-winning David Alano field goal to beat number 21, USC. The Illini are going to host number 1, Ohio State on October 11th, and then they're at Washington and home against Maryland. I mentioned Maryland because they're one of only 4 teams in the Big Ten, along with Indiana, Ohio State, and Oregon, to still be undefeated. So the Terrapins have started well. They won on the road against Wisconsin. Now, Wisconsin isn't as good as they've been in the past, but that's still a good win for the Terrapins. So I think that'll be a game that maybe Illinois will have to watch out for. But overall, I think, yes, they have that big loss to Indiana. And if it comes down to their resume with 2 losses against an SEC team or another Big Ten team, that could hurt. If it comes down to them against Michigan, and Michigan's losses are to either Oklahoma and USC or Oklahoma and Ohio State, I think Michigan would have the advantage there if they both have 2 losses. So that's still going to hurt Illinois. But I think getting this win over USC is big for them, especially overcoming some of those mistakes. For the Trojans, their offense still looks really good. They're going to face number 20 Michigan and number 21 Notre Dame later this season. Notre Dame rolled Arkansas, which forced out Sam Pittman. I'll talk about that in my next point, actually. But USC, they still have the full road to their season ahead. They continue to kind of lose these big games, though, ones that they have a chance where a win in this one probably vaults them into maybe the top 15, although an Illinois team with 2 losses wouldn't be quite as impressive as what Illinois might have been had they beaten Indiana. So that's kind of the outlook for USC. Again, Jaden Maiava continues to look good. He had a good game there, but they're going to need, I think, to figure out the defense. Next up, another big point here. There's been a lot of big firings at some pretty prestigious, historic Power 4 teams or recently successful teams. You've got Mike Gundy out at Oklahoma State. You've got, like I mentioned, Sam Pittman out at Arkansas. Bobby Petrino, who's already on his staff, comes in. He's already retooled the entire staff. And then Deshaun Foster at UCLA and Brent Pry at Virginia Tech. Out of those teams, under their interim coaches, Virginia Tech, the Hokies have looked the best. They've won back-to-back games, including a 23-21 win at NC State. Interim head coach Philip Montgomery is in there. They've got a really, really electric dual-threat quarterback, talented guy in Kyron Drones. They've also got, as usual, a good defense, and they're 1-0 to start ACC play. So Virginia Tech, you look at a lot of teams that fire a coach this early in the season, you're wondering if they can even get to bowl eligibility. Obviously, that will be goal number 1 for Virginia Tech, but I think they can try to maybe finish even in that 7-8 wins area. And if they do that, Montgomery, who I think coached at Tulsa previously as a head coach, I'll have to verify that, could even get the full-time head coaching nod. The Bruins lost 17-14 at Northwestern. Tim Skipper is in there, and they've got probably one of the toughest tests. You're going to have an angry Penn State team coming into the Rose Bowl. Already UCLA is 0-4. It's been kind of a disaster for Nico Iamaleava, and I don't think it's going to get too much better. They've got a really tough schedule the rest of the way. The Cowboys, Oklahoma State, they lost 45-27 at home to Baylor. As somebody who covered the guy who has been starting at quarterback for them, Zane Flores, during his high school career, I hope that they are able to turn things around. I would love to see the Cowboys be able to get some wins under their belt, but it looks like a tough situation there. The Big 12 is so competitive, so that might give them an opportunity because a lot of those games are close, but they really struggled against Baylor in that high-powered trio this past week. Finally, the Razorbacks, they get a much-needed bye. And this is kind of, if this firing was going to happen, it was going to be this week because this allows them to really reset. It allows Petrino to kind of take over his staff, make all the changes that he needs to make, and then get ready for an absolute gauntlet. After that bye, they're going to be at Tennessee and then home against Texas A&M, I believe, in back-to-back weeks. And then later on, they're going to be at number 13 LSU, at number 9 Texas, and home against number 19 Missouri. So it's not going to get any easier for Arkansas. I don't expect them, honestly, to win any of those games. I think all 5 of those teams that they have are pretty good. Maybe they can win one of those other games on their schedule, but I think it's going to be a tough going for Arkansas this year at least. Next up, I had this kind of in my preview, a group of 5 outlook. And to me, I think it's all about the American Conference. Ohio got a good win over Bowling Green. Boise State got a really good win, pretty dominant win over App State. But I think the focus is on the American. I think they're almost locked, pretty much guaranteed, I think, to get that group of 5 playoff spot. Memphis, North Texas, and Navy have looked at the class of the conference so far. Memphis and North Texas are both 5-0. Memphis really put up a ton of points this week against Florida Atlantic, 55-26, and they were part of getting Pittman fired as well, winning 32-31. Navy's 4-0. But then also Tulane, who has 2, I think it's 2 Power 4 wins, or they beat Northwestern and then lost to Ole Miss. They beat Duke as well. Yeah, they're 4-1, 2 Power 4 wins against Duke, who I think is a pretty good team. And then obviously you also got to look out for South Florida. They're 3-1. Obviously they have that win over Boise State earlier, which would benefit them down the line. If Boise State continues to win, they would hold that advantage over the Broncos. Kind of looking ahead, going over some key games between these 5 teams. You've got USF at North Texas, October 10th. Then you've got USF at Memphis on October 25th, 2 weeks later. So South Florida, they have the challenge of playing their 2 biggest games on the road. If they can split, they probably got a good shot to still make it to the conference championship game. If they lose both, they're out. If they win, then I think they're probably the team that ends up winning the conference, because those are two huge games, probably against the toughest games they'll play. A week after that USF Memphis game, you've got Navy at North Texas. North Texas, mentioned them in that first game, hosting the Bulls. They're also hosting the Midshipmen. So the Mean Green, already 5-0. They get the benefit of having their two big conference games, their two biggest ones at home. Then next up after that, Tulane at Memphis on November 7th. And finally, a game that could decide the conference, unless I guess both of these teams are undefeated going into it. Then it's probably just a matter of playing each other back-to-back weeks. Navy at Memphis on Thanksgiving Day, November 27th. So that's kind of the outlook there. I won't predict any of those games yet, but I do kind of want to have those games noted for when we get to those weeks to kind of go over those games a little bit more in depth. Finally, though, wrapping up this video, rapid fire, just going through my top 10. Number 1, I have Ohio State, still probably the best win of this season. Number 2, Oregon. I think they have a win that's up there as well. Probably the toughest. Between them and Alabama, probably two of the best road wins of the season. Number 3, Miami. I think they have a really good resume. I don't think their best win stacks above anybody else's, but I think the depth of their wins does. Number 4, I have Ole Miss. Now, the win over LSU doesn't look as good, but they're also undefeated, unlike Alabama, who I'll talk about here in a little bit. Number 5, Indiana. Kind of same idea here. They routed Illinois. It was a big high, and then you kind of come down. You got to go on the road to Kinnick Stadium. I briefly mentioned that earlier. That's a tough place to go in and play. Fernando Mendoza threw his first interception, but Elijah Surratt looks like one of the best receivers in the Big Ten and maybe even the country. He had that go-ahead touchdown late in that one. So Hoosiers in, for me, the number 5 team. Again, a lot of it's because they're undefeated. Number 6, Oklahoma. They have kind of similarly, not as good of a resume as Miami, but kind of a good overall resume. A win over an Auburn team that pushed Texas A&M really tough. Then I have Alabama. They've got that loss to Florida State, which lessens in value because of the Seminoles' loss to Virginia. But the Crimson Tide, I think, have one of the best road wins this season, if not the best. You could argue that. Number 8. Texas A&M is right there with them. Obviously, they have that really good win over Notre Dame on the road. Number 9, I've got Texas. I think their loss, I kind of went back and forth between them and Georgia here, but I think their loss being to the number 1 team, Georgia's loss being to the team I have at number 7 is slightly better, though their resume probably isn't quite as strong yet as Georgia, but it'll have a chance to get there. They go on the road to Florida this week, which is not a great Gators team, but the Swamp is still always a tough place to play. And then Georgia at number 10. The first team out, I have Penn State. I think, unlike Georgia, who has that win over Tennessee, Penn State doesn't really have anything else to hang their hat on, aside from the fact that they played really well against Oregon. They almost won that game, but they didn't. And they don't have much else on their resume, so I'm going with Penn State as my first team out. Texas Tech, they are the Big 12's top team. I'm going to give them that there, and they have a good win over Utah on the road. I think Utah this last week routed West Virginia, so that win I think will continue to look better as the season goes on. Tennessee and LSU then are a couple of the other teams that I have, I guess, the first 4 out, like they do for the NCAA tournament for March Madness. But that is my breakdown of the Week 5 action, a little bit of a longer one. If you're watching this video, I think I'll also have videos kind of each of the main points of this video as their own separate videos. But if you stuck around to this point in the video, thank you so much. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of Week 5, what your takeaways are, and who you think are the best 10 teams in the country. But that's all for this episode of College Football Talk. I'm your host, Peter Burnett, signing out. Peace.